As I said, a slightly different type of card from me today. It's more of a shaped card, and it's actually a trifold card. And I thought it would be a really lovely idea for wedding invitations, but obviously it doesn't need to be limited to that at all. So I'll just show you around the card. I'll open this up. Okay, so we have a trifold card, as you see, and it's shaped using the edgeables both on the outside, which gives us all the ornate detail, but also on the inside as well, so you have that little bit of interest when you open it up. And I think it really lends itself to wedding invites because of the nature of the way it sits. I mean, I've put an insert on the inside, but this doesn't have to be attached. You can have your wedding details on there, or details of the day, or party invites, and you can also have a loose slip in here as well, which can be your RSVP back to the couple who sent it to you. But equally, if it would make a lovely birthday card or a gift card, as I say, it's just something that little bit different. So I'll show you how I started. As you know, the cards that I like to usually make are square cards, and I've bought myself a pack of card blanks, which would fold into a square card blank. But this time, instead of folding it sort of straight down the middle to create myself I think it's just over 5 inch, let me see, just under a 6 inch square card, I've actually folded it twice, so we can fold it to make a trifold card, like so. I bought the card blanks without any fold in the middle, so basically it is like a stash of white cardstock that I can use for my card blanks. So I'll show you the measurements. I'll use a ruler here. The length of the card is 30 centimetres, so that's just short of a 12 inch length. And as I say, the height of the card, or the width of the card, is just short of 6 inches, so it would actually be 15 centimetres. So we have 15 centimetres by 30, and I've scored the card twice. So we've put them into 3 equal sections, so I've scored at 10 centimetres and I've scored at 20 centimetres. The idea, when you actually refold this card, you actually end up with pretty much a C6 card, which measures like 10 centimetres in width and 15 centimetres high, so it would fit into a standard envelope as well, which again is really important because we don't want to make shaped cards which are really tricky to buy envelopes for, or to find envelopes to fit. Okay, so I have my trifold card, and I'm obviously using it in tent style, so I've put it into landscape orientation like this. Now I should bring in my dies. I'm using the lovely Edgecutz, so the Large Petal design for this. So I'll bring in the dies here. Again, I say it most times, but your dies don't come on a magnetic sheet. This is purely just to stop me from losing them. I know that if I stick them back on this magnetic sheet, then they're sort of going to stay put and not disappear and get stuck onto the back of packaging for me to usually throw away, which is usually what happens. Okay, so if we start off by concentrating on the front of the cardstock first, we want to create this lovely ornate detail, and this is exactly what Lisa designed these dies to do, is to actually cut away and create a decorative edge. So if you excuse all the washi tape here, this just enables me to die cut and have all the dies stay in one place. So when you want to create a decorative edge, you need to take the main die itself, which actually creates all the detail. then you need to also take one of the edger dies that works around the die itself. Now what these do is actually cut this main design away from the card, and by that what I mean is it allows you to create a freestanding embellishment like so. Now I want to have a free edge, so I'm only going to be using the edger dies on one of the edges here, so that will mean that the majority of the die, all the ornate design will actually stay within the card, but by using this edger die here it will actually take away this corner, which will expose the design underneath. I hope that makes sense to you. So you want to position the die onto the card at an angle. I mean, it's entirely up to you. I mean, it would look lovely if you do this straight along, and it would work in exactly the same way. You can always tilt it this way as well. I mean, we all have our preference, but I wanted to keep the die on the angle, which means I actually just tilt that so it fits exactly onto the die either side, so the die just is in line with the edge of the card each way, and that's what determined the positioning of the die really. And we just slot in the edger along the side like so, and that's now when I would use my tape and I would put that through the die cutting machine by opening the card up, and all you need to do is just run the die cutting machine as far as the die and back out again, and that will give you this effect. So you can see what I mean. You have all the ornate detail of the die staying within the card, but you have the lovely edge. And you can see when I take this edger and match that up to the side, you can see just how that works like so, because sometimes, particularly if you're new to die cutting, or if you're and over familiar with this type of die, it can sometimes be a bit tricky to see how each of the dies work. So you can see that that edger works like so. Now holding that die there, you can see that you don't necessarily have to use this main die in that also. If you just wanted to create a lovely decorative edge, you can just use this edger die on its own, and you can leave the whole of this front sort of more solid. So that's the beauty of Lisa's design. She gives you so much scope. So there we are, we've got the front of our card, which is exposed the middle section here. Now what I wanted to do, and I'll just bring in this original one again, when I opened up and you have this middle section, I wanted the edge of this section to also emulate what we have on the front here, so it just gives you a really lovely design detail. Now you can choose which edge you use. You can either use this one here, which incorporates the leaves, or you can go with the other edge, which would have cut out the top of the design like so, and that's exactly what I've used on here. I've actually used the other edge to shape the inside of the card like that. So I just bring in my blank again, and if I bring in my pre-cut one, you'll see how this now works. So we would cut the front with our initial die. So when we open up, we now have our middle section in which I would have lined up the die and pieced that and stuck that into place. See, this is the section that I pulled away. So I would have run that through the die cutting machine. Again, I would have opened it up and just run it through as far as that die needed to go through it. And that section comes away. So now when you fold this up into the trifold again, you don't see the edge die underneath. You only see it when you open up, and you have that lovely detailing. Now to create the colour on top, you take yourself a piece of coloured card. You need to cut this piece of coloured card to actually fit that front section completely. Then you need to take the main dies again and in the same orientation, transfer that down to your coloured card along with the edger, like so, and run that through the die cutting machine, and you can see now we have this section, coloured section, that will sit onto the front of the card and start giving this card its colour scheme and some character there, like that. Now if you wanted, you could reverse this. You could, instead of adding the colour to the top, you could have leave the top white or go with a different colour scheme and actually add some colour underneath. That's entirely up to you. And if you're going to add that underneath, then if you pretend this was a full, you know, a solid piece of card, instead of die cutting the main section, you would go with this edge and you would die cut this card with this edge, and that would have matched this internal section, like so. So you would have had the white of the front and it would have coloured the section underneath, like so, which again would be really lovely in itself. That's entirely up to you, and it's possibly one of the might be the trickiest part of the design, you know, actually deciding what would look best. So now I've shown you the mechanics of that, I'm just going to start attaching this and piecing this together. As I say, I actually chosen this colour. I was out at the beach, our local beach, which is only about 15 minutes away, and there was a wedding. Somebody was there having their wedding photos, and they was actually in white and burgundy, this sort of colour, or dark red, and I thought that'd be sort of perfect colours for today's choice. I did go with the original, my favourite colour is the blue for the original sample, but this one shows up really nicely on screen for you. Okay, so you can see now how I can line up those designs, and actually by putting this colour on the top, on the front of the card, it actually reinforces some of those more delicate sections, sort of giving the card a bit more robust, let's say. So you have a lovely edge there, and that's looking really, really nice, and it's made that design pop already against the white in the background. Now to decorate this under section here, you can either leave as is or you can add a secondary colour, it's entirely up to you. What I've decided to do is to leave it white but use an embossing folder on it. So I die cut myself another section, another piece of card which would match this shaped piece exactly. I've run that through the embossing folder. So I would have had myself a piece of card in exactly the same shape, and I would have lined this up into the embossing folder. I used the line along the bottom actually, which is a really useful reference point to actually line it up and be make sure the design is straight, especially when you've got these linear type designs. And I would have run that through the embossing folder and through the die cutting machine, and we come out with a lovely embossed section like so. I've also done it with the Baroque style folder, which I might actually use on this design today as it is. So we have the Baroque embossing folder, really lovely again in itself, and again the nature of the way that these embossing folders are made, you always have this really straight line at the bottom, which just gives you a really useful reference point just to line up your piece of card underneath, especially if you're using just a section of card. So I would have run that through the embossing machine, and we have a lovely embossed die cut piece. And you can see now, because I've pre-die I die cut it before embossing, we have this that matches exactly. So what I can do now, I can add this. Now you'll notice, and anybody who's actually got these embossing folders will know just how deep the design is etched and embossed into the cardstock. So this would be one of the few times that I would say that be probably a little bit more liberal, a bit more generous with the glue that you add, purely because of the deep embossing. We really want that good connection with the card underneath to make sure that sticks like so. Okay. Now you would have noticed on this original card that I actually embossed this section directly in itself. I didn't actually add another piece of card, and I'm glad I've done it that way, because it showed me and allowed me to change it and tell you to actually emboss a separate piece of card and add it on, because by doing it this way it actually sort of buckled the card a little bit and the card didn't actually sit as nice. So just, especially if you're sending these out as wedding invitations and you want them to look as professional as possible, I think you actually get a much nicer finish if you emboss a second piece of card and actually attach that the way I have done on this design here. And you can see now just how lovely we've got the contrast. We've got the lovely smoothness of the colour sitting on top here, and we've got that embossing underneath. I think that just gives a really, really classy look, and some of that detail is coming through the aperture of the card also. Now I think what we need to do, we just need to jazz up the front of the card a little bit, and you'll see here from the original that I've added extra detail with the flower, and these dies actually come with the die set that we have. So as well as having the actual edge cuts itself, Lisa has given us the larger flower with the outline die, and that sits perfectly on this larger flower here. And she's also given us the smaller ones, which can give us lovely accents around the card, but also sits perfectly within that larger flower there. So because we're working on the front of the card on this lovely dark colour, I thought I would give some contrast. So I've actually die cut this larger flower in white cardstock. And with these dies in particular, I would say we cut the solid one first, so we can see that, and that will actually keep the flower within the card for you. And then once these internal petals are cut, then you go in and you die cut with the edge around the outside, and that releases that from the main card for you. And the reason I say that, because and somebody, possibly Tina, who's a lot more experienced at die cutting than me, I don't think these line up very well together, so I wouldn't, they sit on top of one another. You can see the way that they're sitting actually on top of one another like so. I wouldn't run them through the die cutting machine like that, so because I think you would possibly risk damaging them. So that's why I would say in this particular instance run the two dies through separately. Now this solid die does something really clever. It allows us to keep the petals within this flower, which allows us just to turn those up and just gently use your thumb, between your thumb and your forefinger, just to gently smooth the shape of that flower like so, which lets them petals just stand up a little bit. So that gives us some dimension. Now depending on the design that you're doing, you can always die cut this flower again from a separate colour and sit that underneath, and what that would do is actually give you another colour peeping through from underneath that flower there, which I think would look lovely. But in this instance I'm actually going to keep that as it is, so we have that sits there and we can still see through the base of the flower. Now I'm going to stick that on there, so I can just add the glue to that section. And we can line that flower up perfectly, so that sits in there, and now we've started getting that contrast on the front of the card, the white against that really dark lovely red colour. Now I will die cut the smaller flower to sit in the centre, and I think just to make that pop I'm going to use the burgundy. I didn't do it beforehand because I wanted to show you this piece, but in true craft fashion I know that this will, I can use every little piece of card that I have, so I'm just going to use that little section here, cut the excess away. Now these dies are exactly the same, so what I would say is that you need to cut these two flowers separately. So we need to cut this little flower first. Are we on? Yeah, we can see that on the screen, so I'll just run that quickly through my little machine. And we can see now that we've got the flower in the centre there. And the reason why I say this is because Lisa has given us other dies, and she's given us other floral dies with edges on too, and you can actually run the flower and the edger through together. Let's say I think these dies are designed just a little bit differently because we want a really fine edge around these flower petals, and to do that the dies obviously are a lot more similar in size, so we really don't want to be running those through together and damaging our dies. So we've run that frame through there, and you can see now that's given us our lovely little flower for the centre. And again, the same thing, you can use this die in itself to die cut a solid flower, which you'd be able to sit this one on top of and give a lovely background colour, depending on the design that you're doing. But for this time round I just want to sit this on the front as it is. So bear with me. A little bit of glue, then we can line that up, and just sitting that in the centre, that's really made that white flower come to life and coordinated that with that dark red that's sitting there. Now obviously we have the centre of the flower, it's got a little hole in there, but that is of course just crying out for a little pearl or a little gem. So let me choose one. I might just go with white actually. Do I have any white ones left? Yes I do, I can spot one. So let me get that white one that I can just see spotted there. Now you can tell which ones I use a lot. I don't have many of the white ones left actually, but that just finishes that flower off perfectly, doesn't it? I know Dawn will be agreeing with me. So don't want to lose that, so we can just add a little bit of glue around there. Put a little bit too much glue on there, but that will dry clear.